Masechet Beisah Daf Yud Dalid, and we'll go ahead a little also into Tet Vav so that we can finish the entire first perek of Beisah. We're going to have three main topics. Number one is preparing spices on Yom Tov. The second is borer, taking good from bad. You want to separate different types of food, the food from the waste. And the third topic is sending gifts to other people on Yom Tov. In all three of these cases, we're going to have a same common denominator, which is a competing values. On the one hand, we don't want people to do any extra work on Yom Tov. It's a day of relaxation, so you should have prepared whatever you could before. So don't do extra work. On the other hand, we want Yom Tov celebration to be fantastic and have good and fresh food and be able to send gifts one to another. So therefore, within these two competing values, we find the right compromise, the perfect place in the middle, which is always where we want to be. So we begin, Bet Shammai Omerim Tevalin Nidochin B'madoch Shel Aetz V'Melach B'Pach U'Ba'etz HaParur. We are grinding spices. Bet Shammai says you're allowed to grind spices, but not in a regular way. You can't use, normally you would use a stone mortar and pestle. On Yom Tov, do it in a different way, a way that's substandard to show that I'm not doing things in a normal weekday manner. So therefore use the wooden mortar and pestle. And that's for spices. Salt, however, you should use not even the wooden mortar and pestle, just use a vessel or an earthenware flask or a ladle made out of wood and bang it with the back of the ladle, which is really a very substandard way of doing it. So you see, salt is more stringent than other spices. The Talmud will explain why. Bet Shammai is more stringent here. Ubet Hillel omrim tevalin nidochin kedarkan b'madoch shel even v'melech b'madoch shel aetz. Bet Hillel brings everything one step more lenient and says spices, you can grind them normally with a stone mortar and pestle, no problem for spices. And salt, he treats salt the way Bet Shammai treats other spices, that you can use a wooden mortar and pestle to do something a little different. Okay, so now we have these two opinions. The Gemara notes, both according to Bet Shammai and according to Bet Hillel, you have to make some difference there is a difference between spices and salt. Spices are more lenient and salt is more stringent. So why is there a difference between the two? We're going to see two reasons, and then we'll see practical differences between these two reasons. Rav Huna and Rav Chisda, one of them said one said the other. We don't have on record who said which. Had amar kol hakederot kulan srichot melach, ven kol hakederot srichot tevalin. Simple reason. Every dish needs salt. You put salt in everything. Whereas not every dish needs pepper or saffron or any other particular kind of spice. Therefore, salt is predictable. You should have known that you're going to need salt on Yom Tov, and therefore you should have prepared beforehand and ground up some salt to use. However, the other spices, you have a dozen spices in your spice closet. You don't know exactly what you're going to make. You don't know which spice you're going to use and how much you're going to use it. So there's no way to prepare the other spices. Therefore, other spices are more lenient. According to Bet Hillel, you can grind other spices normally. That's one reason. Other reason. All other spices, their taste, it loses their taste if you wait a day or two. When you grind pepper right away, it has a stronger taste. And therefore, we want to maximize the enjoyment of Yom Tov, and you want to have nice, fresh pepper and spices, and therefore you're allowed to do it today because it would lose flavor if you did it yesterday, which is not true with salt. Salt, if you did it yesterday, it still tastes salty today. It doesn't lose any taste, and therefore this is the principle. Anything you could have done before without any loss, you should have done before, and then you can't do that on Yom Tov. Okay, my benaihu, what would be two practical cases where there will be a difference in halacha depending on which reason you pick, right? The reason has a strong effect on the practical application. If you knew you had your menu prepared in advance, you knew exactly what you were going to cook, then in that case, according to the first reason, you should have prepared the spices that you were going to use. You knew that you were going to make something with mint, then you should have prepared the mint before. Whereas according to the second reason, even if you know what you're going to make before, nevertheless, the spices lose their taste. So then it would still be permitted. And the second case, iname b'morika, and this is the opposite regarding saffron. Saffron does not lose its taste, even if you do it from the day before. And therefore, in that case, according to the second reason, you should have prepared saffron from before, because the same as salt. You couldn't, you don't need to do it today. Whereas according to the first reason that, well, I don't know what I'm going to cook. I'm not sure if it's going to need saffron. How many dishes need saffron? And therefore, I could not have prepared it before. According to that reason, it would be permitted to grind the saffron on Yom Tov, according to Bet Hillel, without any change. According to Bet Shammai, just with a small change. All right, so now so far we have two opinions. Now we're going to see an even more lenient opinion than either of them. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shemuel, Kol hanidochin nidochin kedarkan, va'afilu melach. You're allowed to grind any spices, even salt, in a regular way on Yom Tov. This is the opinion of Shemuel. Now, Shemuel is an early Amorah, but how can he go and disagree with Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai? So we're going to have to explain this one. Wait, we just said that for sure. Okay, fine. Regarding other spices, Bet Hillel would agree, but regarding salt, even Bet Hillel says you have to do something different. Shemuel is following a different Tana, the Tanya. And here we have a Braita, and again, this Braita has a very completely different version of the Machloket Bet Hillel Bet Shammai than the one in our Mishnah. We saw a few examples of this already. There seems to have been different collections, different memories of what Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai said. So this one is Amar Rabbi Meir, Lo nechliku Bet Shammai or Bet Hillel al hanidochin shenidochin kedarkan umelach imahen. Actually, according to Rabbi Meir, Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel agree regarding anything that you grind, that you can grind it in a regular way, including salt. See, this is what Shemuel said. So then what do they disagree about? Lo nechliku ela leducha b'fnei atzma. The only question is if you're going to grind the salt by itself. In other words, they agree that if you're going to grind salt and other spices all together, then you can do it in a regular way. You put them all in the grinder and do it together. But if you're just doing salt, that's the only machloket. Shebet Shammai omrim melach bepach ubetza paru lesali avalo lekedera. Bet Shammai limits it and says the salt you can only do with the wooden ladle, the back of the ladle, and you can only do it enough that you would use for salting meat to barbecue, but not to cook. If you're cooking meat, you have to put a lot of salt because you got to get all the blood out. But if you're barbecuing, then you don't have to salt the meat at all, actually, because all the blood just goes down onto the fire. So there's no problem of eating the blood. You only put a little salt just for taste. And so Bet Shammai says you have to do it in a different way with using a vessel that's not made for grinding, and you can only do a little at a time. Bet Hillel says you can use anything. We asked to clarify. You can use anything. You can use a rock. Can use an iPhone. These are things that are mukseh, and you're not allowed to use them even for grinding. Rather, not bechol davar, but lechol davar, you're allowed to grind salt for any amount of salt, even if it's by itself, is permitted. So you see, Shemuel has a different version of the machloket, where according to Bet Hillel, salt is okay totally, and Bet Shammai only would, even Bet Shammai would say, you can grind salt as long as you're grinding it with other spices. So now we have Shemuel, that's a much more lenient opinion. Now we'll see a couple of stories. Amar le Rav Acha bar Dela dibre ki daichat asli asluye vedoch. Rav Acha told his son, when you grind salt or maybe other spices too, you can use the grinder, but tilt it on its side. So you can use the regular grinder, but use it in a slightly different way than usual. Put a shinui in it, and that will remind you it's Yom Tov, and you won't treat it like it's a regular weekday. That's what he did. Rav Sheshat Shema Kol Buchna Amar Hai Lab Mikaveh de Betaihu. Rav Sheshat, once he was coming home, he heard the sound of a pestle. He heard banging, and he said, "That's not from my house. I know it's not because I don't permit the members of my house to do any grinding at all. So you see that at least for himself, for his household, he was more stringent. Now we ask, why not? Maybe the people in his house were using it in a tilted way, and then it would be permitted. Why did he assume that it wasn't his house? He could tell the difference in sound. When you bang on when you use a mortar and pestle straight, then it has a clear sound. When you use it sideways, then it has a more echoey sound. And he heard it was a clear sound and said, no one in my house would use it unless it was tilted. So for sure it's not. Wait, maybe it was spices and not salt, and spices are more lenient, and maybe that was okay. No, spices make a different sound. When you grind pepper, right, it makes like a barking sound, which is not true regarding salt. So I could tell that it's salt. I could tell it's directly on the straight on the table, and therefore it's for sure not my house. Okay, so that's good. We can learn something even just from the subtleties of the sounds of grinding. I like how this section of Talmud kind of brings alive the sounds and smells and tastes from 2,000 years ago in the kitchen of the rabbis as they're preparing their holiday meal. So that's very beautiful. The halacha l'maaseh is more or less like what Avacha says, which is that one is not permitted to grind salt or other spices on Yom Tov in a regular way. So sometimes people buy, like a salt grinder. That's the regular way that you do it. So that would be a problem. It is permitted to pound it out using a vessel or doing it in a different way than usual. So that is the halacha l'maaseh as well. Good. Next case, Tenu Rabbanan, en osin tisaneh ven kochin b'machteshet. So now we're talking about grinding grains. And so one is not allowed to make this groats, this tisaneh, which is you take grains of wheat and you cut it into quarters and you make this dish, and it requires a lot of effort and a lot of grinding. So that's not appropriate to spend all your day on Yom Tov doing that work. You're also not allowed to use a grinder for grain, for wheat. Now, we wonder about this baraita. Why do you have to tell me two things? You just said that you're not allowed to use a grinder. So why do you have to give me a particular example? Don't grind, don't make this groats dish, and don't use a grinder. If I know that I can't use a grinder, then for sure I can't do the first one. So you're right. We're giving a reason. You can't make this groats dish because you can't use a grinder. You can't use a mortar and pestle. So that's why you're not allowed to do it. Okay, fine. But that still doesn't make sense, because then just give the second line. Just give the reason. You can't use a grinder. And then I would know I can't make all these things that I would use it to grind wheat. If I only had that second line, I would think maybe that's only talking about a large mortar and pestle. Usually for grains, you use a large mortar and pestle. For spices, you use a small one because they have to be finer, and you don't need as much for spices. So if it just said that, I would have thought maybe it's talking about a big one, but this teaches even a small one, because this tisaneh, because you need it more finely ground, people generally use the small mortar and pestle for the tisaneh. So these two statements come to teach me that both a large and even a small one, I'm not allowed to use on Yom Tov. All right, so that's one baraita. Now we have a contradiction from another baraita. V'hatanya en kochin b'machteshet gedola aval kochin b'machteshet ketana. This one says explicitly you can't use a big one, but you can use a small one. Big one is more work. Small one is less work. So now we have a contradiction. We're going to see a couple of answers. Amar Abaye ki tanya name matnita machteshet gedola tanya. Abaye says, oh, you're right. You know what? I'm going to reinterpret the first one, not like the answer we said. Rather, that also is talking about a large one. It says a large mortar and pestle you're not allowed to use. And it said a separate halacha also, don't make that tisaneh. Tisaneh requires a lot of work, so don't make that. That's one law. And then also don't use a large mortar and pestle. But I taught to agree that you can use a small one as long as you're not making tisaneh. That's one answer. Rava amar la kashya. Halan v'halehu. This is an interesting answer. Rava says there's a different ruling for the people in Bavel. In Bavel, they don't have servants. So in Bavel, it's more lenient. They're allowed to use a small mortar and pestle because the people are preparing the food themselves, and they'll be careful to use the small one and not the big one. In Eretz Yisrael, however, maybe they were wealthier and they had servants, and the servants were not trustworthy. The servants would go and they would use the big one because it's easier to do. And then they would come in and say, wait, how'd you make that? I was, we used the small one. The servants would lie. And then that would mean that the people of the house would be benefiting from someone who was violating Yom Tov. And so therefore they made a ban. And as Yisrael, don't use the big one or the small one because people there had servants that they couldn't trust, and then they wouldn't be able to distinguish. Good. Now we have a case even in Bavel where there was someone who was stringent. That Pape Mor Shemuel. The Pape went to the home of Mor Shemuel, was from the family of the exilarch of the Resh Galuta. So this is a very rich household, and they for sure had servants. They brought him some porridge made from grinding wheat, and he would not eat it. The Papi, the guest, would not eat it. Wait a second, maybe they used a small one and it's permitted, so you can make porridge in a permitted way. No, the he looked, he saw that these are very much ground, and that couldn't be done by the small one. It must have done the big one in order to get all this porridge and do this job. Wait a second, maybe they prepared it from the day before. Who says they violated Yom Tov to make it? No, he looked carefully and he saw that the husks were bright, and that means they were just ground now. You see that Papi could have been a good detective. He can tell from little clues what the story is. So that's one way he knew that they must have violated Yom Tov. Or the other reason is he knew that in Moshe Shemuel they have a lot of servants, and the servants are not careful, and they go ahead and they do different prohibitions. And so he knew in this house I can't trust the kashrut, and so he refrained from eating it. I'm sure that was a difficult decision because Moshe Shemuel, being from the family of the Resh Galuta, we don't really want to be on the bad side of Resh Galuta. We have other stories in the Talmud about some tensions between some of the rabbis and the Resh Galuta. All right, so that ends topic number 1 regarding spices. And now we're going to talk about separating. Haborer kitniyot b'yom tov. Borer, generally separating good from bad, bad from good. This is one of the melachot on Shabbat. But here you want to do it for the sake of food. So things that you can do for the sake of food should be permitted, but with limitations, because we don't want people to sit and be doing a lot of work on Yom Tov either. So therefore, if you're going to be separating legumes, the edible parts, the inside from the outside inedible part, Bet Shammai omrim borer ochel ve'ochel. Bet Shammai says you can, right, ochel means food, ochel is the verb, and you can eat it. You can take the food and eat the food, right? And so there's 2 things here. One of them is that you're doing it immediately, you're eating it, you're not separating a lot to use after, and you're taking the good from the bad. That's Bet Shammai. ובית הלל אומרים בורר כדרכו בחיקו בקנון ובתמחוי אבל לא בטבלה ולא בנפה ולא בכברה. Bet Hillel says you can do it in a somewhat normal way, which is you can use your lap. They were robes, so you put it in your lap, and then you'd shake your robe, and then the light stuff would go to one side, and you can get all the grains to go down to the other side. And that would be one way, or in a tray or a vessel, right? And the same idea. These are things that are general purpose items, so you can use that to separate also, but you can't use the special items like a tablet, a window, a sieve. These are used to separate a lot at a time, and that would be a weekday type of activity, not appropriate for Yom Tov. So Bet Hillel agrees that there's some limitations, but is more lenient about what they are. Rabban Gamliel omer af madiach ve'sholeh. Rabban Gamliel has an even better way to separate, which is you put it all in water, and then the good part is not clear, which you could be either way. Either in this case, let's say it's the shells. The shells are lighter and they'll float to the top, and the stuff that you want would be on the bottom. Or maybe it's a different case where you have something that is dirty, and then the dirt will fall to the bottom, and the food that you want to eat will float to the top, and then you could skim the top, and so that would be an easier way. So that is the suggestion of Rabban Gamliel. It's not clear if he's being more machmir or more mekel. right? By saying af, it sounds like he's being more mekel. And you can even do this. Not only can you use your robe and a tray, you can even do it this way. Other versions don't have the word af, meaning this is a better way to do it. It's less work, right? You don't have to shake anything. Just put water in it. Okay, so that's some useful information. Now, Tanya, the Gemara says, Amar Rabban Gamliel, Bameh devrim hamorim כשהאוכל מרובה על הפסולת, אבל פסולת מרובה על האוכל, דברי הכל נוטל את האוכל ומניח את הפסולת. This Baraita Rabban Gamliel says that this whole machloket between Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai only applies in the case where the food, there's more food than there is waste. So when there's more food than waste, then it's actually easier to take the waste out. So in other words, Bet Hillel permits taking the waste out when there is less waste. So that would be less work. But if there's more waste than there is food, then you're going to have to spend more work removing the waste. And that's not good because we want to minimize the amount of work that you do. So in that case, even Bet Hillel would agree with Bet Shammai that you have to take the food, you have to take the good from the bad. Okay, so that makes sense. The point is to minimize work. Gemara asks, why would you even have to give such a clarification? Taking the waste, when there's more waste than there is food, would anybody permit you to take the waste? I mean, that's going to be more work. And you also, it's not benefiting your eating directly. See, when there's more food than waste, even though you're taking the food, it's okay because you're eating it, right, as you're taking it. So you're still benefiting directly. But why would anybody think that this would be allowed when there's more waste? It could be a case where, in terms of actual mass, there's less waste, but it's more work to get that waste out, right? Maybe it's on the bottom, it's hard to do. And so therefore saying that even if it's actually less in volume, but if it's more work, then don't do it. So the bottom line is that whatever is less work is permitted. And that's what Shulchan Aruch says as well. Next, Rabban Gamliel used this, the water trick. Tanya Amar Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Sadok, Kacha hayu minhagan shel bet Rabban Gamliel, shehu mevi'in delim ale adashim umesifin alav mayim nimsa ochel lemata psolet lemala. Here's actually what they used to do in his household. Rabban Gamliel was the Nasi, and so he did things very fancy in a very fancy way. He'd take a bucket of lentils, put water in it, and then the lentils, which are heavy, would go to the bottom, and the waste, straw, whatever was there, or shells, would go to the top, and then he could just simply remove the refuse which is on top, which is a leniency because you can remove the refuse. Now, wait a second, we saw the opposite, because in the Mishnah it says you can go take the top, and it sounds like the top is the good part that you're eating. So that's the opposite of here, where the refuse is going to the top. We're talking about different cases. One is talking about earth and dirt, and that goes to the bottom. Whereas here we're talking about straw, and straw is refuse that goes to the top. So depending on what is the refuse and which refuse is lighter or heavier than the food, you will use this trick in two different ways. All right, now, next Mishnah, Bet Shammai Omerim, En Meshalachim B'Yom Tov Ela Manot. We're talking about now sending gifts, right? Not only on Purim, also on other holidays, right? We do this, we send gifts to each other, to our parents, to our in-laws, of food especially, but we're talking about clothing, even shoes. I don't know, you could try that, send shoes to your friend. So Bet Shammai says you cannot send En Meshalachim B'Yom Tov Ela Manot. You can only send food that's ready to eat. Similar to Purim, right? When the point is not to give someone raw ingredients, and then someone did send me some raw ingredients of pizza this past Purim, and then we had to make it ourselves. Okay, they sent other things too, but it was actually fun to make the pizza, right? But the point is, give ready food because you want to minimize work, and don't make your recipient do the work and have to cook it. Ben Shechotin. Bet Hillel is more lenient and says, send anything. You can even send an animal, a whole animal, whether it's dead or even alive. Try that. Send a live goat to your in-laws next holiday. And all right, why not? So they'll do some extra work, and they'll have to cook it, kill it, and cook it and eat it. But then they'll have a nice fresh animal to eat. And it seems that they all agree that you can send wine, a finished product, oil, flour, and even legumes. They're going to require some work, but that's okay. So you do a little work and you separate it. The only thing you're not allowed to send is grain, because grain is totally unprocessed. And now you're not allowed to mill the grain, turn it into flour. That has to be done before. So really grain has zero value on Yom Tov, and therefore you should not do any extra work. You're going to have to go and get the grain and carry it and bring it to your friend, and he has to bring it inside. This is all unnecessary work. I mean, it's nice to get a gift, but it's not a gift that you can use. However, Rabbi Shimon Matir b'Tivua, he disagrees and says, yeah, you can use grain. It's true, you can't grind it up into flour and make bread, but you can smash it and make a porridge, right? We saw before that there are ways to do that. And so therefore, even though it's a lot of work and the food isn't as great as getting some lamb chops, fresh lamb chops, but nevertheless, it has some use and therefore is permitted according to the Bishimon. Question?
Yeah, Rabbi, it's funny because so they don't want you to do extra work. So they say, okay, on the holiday, you're not allowed to do something that you didn't prepare before the holiday. So we're going to give you some leniency and allow you to do it with shinui. But with the shinui, sometimes it's actually harder to do the item. Okay,
yeah, that's a good point, right? If you want to grind pepper, and now you're gonna have to go get a spoon and bang on it, it's gonna be more work. That is true. Nevertheless, because it's going to be more work, that will, number one, encourage you to do it before. And second, even though it is a little bit more work, but by doing it a different way, you are reminding yourself that it is the holiday. And so therefore, don't do too much of this. Only do a little bit, as much as you need. Maybe otherwise, while you're grinding salt, you grind a whole cupful to use for later, to use for tomorrow. So it's important to have this. Really, we don't want you to do this work. If you're going to do it, at least by doing it a different way, you can keep a sense of the spirit of the holiday. But you're right; it is a good point that there are, in exceptional cases, places where it will require a little extra effort. All right. When you're sending these gifts to your friends, don't do it with a convoy of people, because then, even if you're sending a lot of things, you send a whole group of people and everybody's carrying basketfuls, that looks like you're sending merchandise to the store or to the shuk. And that would be a weekday thing. People looking, oh, look, he's sending all of his fruit to the, he has 10 people carrying it. That looks like he's making a shipment to a store and not to a single person. So therefore, just give a little gift, enough that one or two people can carry. What's the definition of a convoy? Convoy is not less than 3 people. So if just 1 or 2 people, that's fine. 3 people already, it looks like you're carrying merchandise. Question. If you have 3 people, but each one is carrying a different thing, one's carrying fruit, one's carrying meat, one's carrying wine. And so you could see that there's 3 people because they're carrying different things. Will the onlooker say, oh, this is a caravan giving things brings things to the shuk? Or would he say, no, it's just a large gift that the person is making to maybe to the Reshka Luta, or an important person that he needs to get favor from. So we leave this question standing. So maybe better to send it a little at a time. And finally, the Bishimon Matir b'Tvu'ah. Tanya Rabbi Shimon Matir b'Tvu'ah kigon hatin lasot mehen ludiyot seorim liten lifnei behemto adashim lasot mehen resisin. So Rabbi Shimon permits even giving raw grain, because there's still things you could do with it. You could make this porridge or a cream of wheat with barley. You can give it to the animals, and that also is helping your Yom Tov, that you can feed your animals. And with the lentils, you could make this risisin, this crushed lentil soup, which sounds delicious. And so there's use even for these raw materials. And the last Mishnah, Meshalachin Kelim not only food, which is really interesting because this whole time we were talking about special leniencies for food on Yom Tov, but Simchat Yom Tov can be sending someone a tie or a shirt. So you can send those ben tefurin, ben shenan tefurin, whether they are sewn or even if they are unsewn, right? Just raw material. Send a couple of yards of cotton. That would be okay. Even if it's kilayim, even if it's mixed with wool and linen, which you wouldn't be able to use for anything, you can't wear it. Nevertheless, it's allowed. This is quite surprising. The Gemara will explain it. As long as it's for the purpose of the holiday, whatever, something that would benefit in some way. Now you can send shoes as long as they are wearable shoes. You have to know the person's size and all that. But if it has a spiked sandal, right, it has nails on the bottom, kind of like cleats, you cannot send those. The Gemara will say why. Also, if it's not sewn, that's not a wearable shoe. It's a shoe that's only half made. So no one can wear that. Also not white shoes. What's wrong with white shoes? They mean that it's not colored. It's still like raw material and doesn't have the polish, the black polish on it that they usually would use. Because these things is not something like you can just fix yourself at home. You have to go take it to the shoemaker to go ahead and paint it black. So even if it's physically wearable, but nobody would wear it without the paint on it. Here's a general rule: as long as you can get benefit from it on Yom Tov, then you're allowed to send it. But it has to be immediate benefit that they get on Yom Tov. Even if it's a very nice gift, but they're gonna have to put it together and do something later, that's no good. My brother likes to give my kids lots of science toys and gifts. He gives them like rockets. You have to put it together yourself. Comes with 1,000 pieces. So I always like, wow, thank you so much for this gift. I'm so glad I have to spend the next 10 Sundays putting this together, right? I'd much rather a gift that's all put together, just open the box and it's ready to go, right? You don't want to send gifts that you have to do work because then you can't enjoy Yom Tov. It's not helping you enjoy Yom Tov. So don't go through the effort of sending it if you can't enjoy it. All right, good. Now, bishlamat tefurin. We understand regarding clothing that's sewn, right? You send me a nice robe. Great, I'll wear it today. Chazul malbush. Even if it's not, even if it's as raw material, I could use it as a blanket, as a covering. I could use it as a tablecloth, as I can a napkin, a handkerchief, whatever. So that's fine. But if it's made out of wool and linen, what can I use it for? What good is that? Maybe you'll say I can sit on it. I can use it on my chair cushion because I'm not wearing it. I'm just sitting on it. No, but that's also not allowed. So from the letter of the law midoraita, you're right. That says kilayim cannot be on you, but you can put it under you and sit on it. Nevertheless, the Rabbanan came and said, don't do that because even if it's under you, maybe a thread that's sticking out of it will wrap around on your leg while you're sitting, and then you're going to get some benefit, some warmth. The prohibition of kilayim is if you're getting some benefit, some shade, protection, warmth from it. And so even if you're sitting on it, you may a piece of it may go on your skin and give you warmth. So therefore, that's not allowed. So we're still left with the question, why would it be permitted to send someone a cloth of kilayim? And maybe you'll say, oh, there's something separating between them. So you have, I'm wearing my cotton pants, and then on top of that, I have the kilayim, so I'm not touching it. It's not benefiting me. Okay, whenever you have a long tradition like this, there's going to be something very, very important. That they said, "Afilu etzer matzaot zo al gabe zo vechilaim tachtehen asur lishon alehem." You heard of the princess and the pea, right? This is the rabbi and kilayim. Even if you have kilayim on the bottom and you have 10 mattresses on top of each other and you're all the way on top, it's nevertheless prohibited from sitting on them. So not only if it's on top of you, even if it's under you, it's prohibited. So now we really have no idea what use would there possibly be for kilayim. You can't wear it. You can't even sit on it. You can't even sit on 10 mattresses on top of it. Seems to be related to this. Oh, final answer is we're talking about a curtain, a window shade that you are allowed to make out of kilayim because you're not wearing it. So there you go. I have some benefit from it. I'll use it as a window shade. No, that's not good either, because where Ula said that a vilon, a window shade, even though it doesn't look like a vessel, right? You don't hold anything in it, you don't wear it. So can it become tameh? You might have thought that it's not a vessel, it's raw material, and it doesn't become tameh. But he taught that sometimes the servants and the attendants in the house would use it as a blanket, and they'd wrap it around themselves and get warm with it. And therefore, it is considered a vessel, it is considered clothing. And because of that, if it was made out of kilayim, it would still be a problem. So we can't even use it for a window shade. Ela bekashin. Here's the real final answer. We're talking about kilayim that is hard, like it's a felt material, and it would not be good for wearing. It doesn't give you any warmth because it's hardened material. And we have a tradition of from Rav Huna. He said this felt that's made in the city of Neresh in Bavel is permitted. You can sit on it because it's very hard. So there's no problem that a piece of it is going to wrap around your leg or anything like give you warmth or anything like that, because it's stiff. And so we're talking about that. You can send someone a stiff piece of cloth that is kilayim, and then they can use it as a mat. Good. Amara Papa, ardalayin en bahen mishum kilayim. Similarly, these shoes that are made out of kilayim, but they're hard. So that's also okay because they're hard. They don't provide warmth. Amarava hane sedaret shite en bahen mishum kilayim. These pouch for coins, which is made out of kilayim fabric, no problem, because it's hard, it's stiff and hard to hold your coins, and you don't get any benefit or warmth from it. However, this other kind of pouch that's also made out of wool and linen, that's used for holding seeds. You see the word bizraneh, bizr, right? So your bizr pouch is kilayim, because that one is already bigger and softer, and you can put it on your lap, and it will keep your legs warm. You can put it on your head, keep your head warm. So it is, therefore, you can benefit from it, and therefore you should not use it if it's kilayim. Amarav Asher, Rav Asher said, no, don't worry about it. So what? You have a bag with your sunflower seeds in it that's made out of wool and linen. That's not a normal way. You don't use it as a hat. You don't use it for warmth, and therefore it's permitted to use it for carrying your sunflower seeds. All right. Now regarding the sandal, avalos sandal hamisumar. You're not allowed to send someone a gift. You can send shoes, but not that are usable, but not spiked shoes, not cleats. Why not? Because of that great occurrence. What are they talking about? Remember, back in Masechet Shabbat, we explained the occurrence. One time during Roman times, the Jews were hiding out from the rebels in the middle of the war, hiding in a cave, and they heard sound of these nailed shoes. Nailed sandals were worn apparently by Roman soldiers. They thought it was a Roman soldier. Turned out it wasn't. It was just some guy who was wearing them. And they all got into a panic in the cave, and they were running different ways and trampled each other. And they killed each from themselves just from the panic and trampling. Many of them died, even though there was no enemy around. And so because of that, they made a decree. Listen, no wearing spiked sandals on Shabbat. Now, what does it help to do it on Shabbat? You should say no spiked sandals ever, because of that, what happened. But the rabbis don't have the a way to just say you're not allowed to wear spiked sandals. They're piggybacking on the laws of Shabbat, when we already do have many laws about what you're allowed to wear and what's considered carrying and not carrying. So they said, listen, we can use the Shabbat laws because people have authority here and say, don't wear it on Shabbat. Talmud Yerushalmi explains that most people only had one pair of shoes anyway. So therefore, if you tell them you can't wear it on Shabbat, they're not going to buy it because what's the point? It's like buying fancy jewelry that, when do you go out and see people? On Shabbat, during the week, you're out in the field. So then you wouldn't buy it at all. Okay, so that seems to be the thing, the cause that happened. There's others that actually say that they were talking about Jewish rebels, the Jews that were zealots and started the fight against the Romans. One of their uniform, part of the uniform were spiked sandals. We actually found this, one of the Bar Kokhba caves. We found an actual spiked sandal there that seems to belong to a Jew, and therefore this is slightly different explanation. The rabbis wanted to discourage anyone from joining that group of zealot rebels because they're very dangerous and they did cause the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. And so one way that they did it, says you're not allowed to wear it, you're not allowed to wear these on Shabbat. All right, in any case, not only are you not allowed to wear them on Shabbat, you're also not allowed to wear them on Yom Tov. So if you happen to have a pair of these cleats, you cannot send it to your friend on Shabbat or Yom Tov because they can't wear it. So there's no point in sending it. All right. Amar Abaye, sandal mesumar asur lena'alo umutar letaltelo asur na'alo mishum maseh shaya umutar letaltelo betikatani en mishalachin tisaka da'atech asur letaltelo ashtar letaltelo asur mishalachin meba'ya. Abaye derives an inference from here, and they said these spiked sandals, you're not allowed to wear them, but you're allowed to move them. They're not mukseh. I don't know why you would move them to use for, I don't know, a paper holder or something. Now, we're not allowed to wear them because of that incident, and we want to memorialize and remember, don't wear these spiked shoes and don't start up with the Romans. But from the fact that it says, if it were prohibited to even move, then you wouldn't have to say you can't send it. If it's mukseh, you can't even move it. So for sure you can't send it. So that's why he learns that you can in fact move it. Okay. Now next part of the Mishnah. If it's an unsewn shoe, pishita, of course you can't wear that. It has no use. What are you going to do with the open shoe? Oh, you might have thought that since you can, even if it has no laces and not sewn up, but you can take pins and you can wear it in a temporary way like that. So it is actually wearable. Nevertheless, it's not wearable in a comfortable way, and therefore it's prohibited from sending that to a friend. The not even a white one that's not painted black. Tanya Rabbi Yehuda matir b'shachor ve'oser b'lavan mipnei shesarich besat higir. So we have a braita that explains. Rabbi Yehuda says it's permitted if it's black and just not allowed if it's white, because you need this chalk, this special lump of chalk to color it properly. So if it's white, and you can't get that chalk and you can't use it on Yom Tov. But Rabbi Yehuda says it's not permitted even if it's black, because it still needs polishing. In other words, it has to be fully processed and done, even polished. So we have these two opinions, but we explained they're not arguing. They do different things in different places. In the place of Rabbi Yehuda, the first opinion, they have the leather, the part of the skin that's facing the flesh of the animal, which is rougher, and that needs polishing because it has all clumps and cuts on it. So in his area, that side was facing your foot, facing underneath, and therefore it didn't need polishing because it's on the inside of the shoe anyway. And that's why he just says it has to be it can't be white, just make sure it's black. In the place of Rabbi Yosef, however, they flipped it around and they took the fleshy side of the skin, and that was on the outside of the shoe. And on the outside of the shoe, people can see it. It has to look nicer, and therefore it's not sufficient if it's painted black. It also has to be smoothed out and polished, and that's why he's more machmir in his place. And finally, Zakelal kol sheneotin bo b'yom tov. The Mishnah ends with a general rule: anything that you can benefit from on the holiday, you're allowed to send. What is this adding? I want to send my friend a nice pair of tefillin. Is that allowed on Yom Tov? Yes, it's allowed. This is surprising because tefillin has no use on Yom Tov. You're not allowed to wear tefillin on Yom Tov. Some people say you don't have to, but it seems most people think you're not even allowed to wear them. Amar le'Abaye v'ha'anan tenan kol sheneotin bo b'Yom Tov mishalechin oto. Wait a second, you just said anything that you can benefit from Yom Tov, you can send it, but this you cannot benefit from it. Hachika amar kol sheneotin bo bechol mishalechin oto b'Yom Tov. What we meant is anything that you can benefit from right away without having to now process and polish and sew and all that, you can send that on Yom Tov. So it's true, you can't benefit from Yom Tov on Yom Tov, but you can use it. Maybe it's talking about using it on Chol HaMoed. And it seems that the original custom was, in fact, that they wore tefillin on Chol HaMoed, not what we do today, which is based on Kabbalah, that we don't wear tefillin. So maybe still for the purpose of the holiday, even though not for the purpose of Yom Tov. But this is a big chidush that you can give tefillin even though you're not actually wearing it on that day. Okay, we ended the laws of Yom Tov, but now that you mentioned tefillin, I have something else to tell you about tefillin as it relates to carrying on Shabbat. You're walking home on Shabbat and you miscalculated, and you're still, an hour out of your city, however far, right? I'm not outside the Tuchum, forget Tuchum. We're talking about just carrying. You're still outside the city and you're wearing your tefillin, and now it gets dark. So here's the problem. You're not allowed to be wearing tefillin on Shabbat. So if you take off your tefillin, you think that'll help, right? But now the problem is you're carrying your tefillin. Now carrying tefillin is a much bigger prohibition. Carrying on Shabbat is a much bigger prohibition than wearing tefillin on Shabbat. Okay, why not just take it off and put it down? Because then it will get stolen, it will get ruined, it will get lost. And that's also not good. That's not honorable for the tefillin. So the best solution out of all three is to leave the tefillin on. If you're wearing it, you're not carrying it, so that's okay. And you'll just put your hand on it to show that I don't think that I'm allowed to wear tefillin. I know I'm not supposed to be wearing tefillin, so I'm covering it, I'm hiding it. So I'm only wearing it, but not wearing it for the purpose of not carrying, but not wearing it for the mitzvah. And so you do that until you get to your house. And when you get to your house, then you take it off. So that would be the solution. Same thing regarding in the Bet HaMidrash. The Bet HaMidrash in those days, it seems, was far away out of the city. Maybe there were 2 or 3 villages that shared one Bet Midrash. So it was in the middle of nowhere. And you can't just leave it there. It's not safe to leave it there. And so the same thing. You're in the Bet Midrash, and obviously said, oh no, Shabbat started, and you got to get home. So same thing, you wear it till you get home, and you cover it with your hand to show that I know that there's no mitzvah to wear it on Shabbat or Yom Tov. Good. So that is the halacha. Now we have another version of this statement, right? This one was said by Abaye, and now Metiv Rav Huna bered Rav Ika, and he brings another baraita that has a different law, a different detail. Haya ba baderech utfilin berosho vekadash alav hayom maniach yado alehen ad shemegia labayit hasamuch lechoma. According to this, if you're on a journey and you're coming back home and you realize your tefillin are on, and now Shabbat started, so you put your hand on it until you get to the first house in the wall of the city. And your friend there lives there, and whoever, even a stranger, you give it to that person. You say, listen, I have my tefillin here. Can you hold it for me? In other words, the point is you shouldn't be wearing it even for a few more minutes than you need to, because you're not allowed to wear it on Tov. Once you get into the city, then you have a safe place to put it. So give it to the first person that you see, first house that you see. And the same thing, if you're in Bet Midrash and you come and then you realize you're wearing tefillin, so cover it with your hand until you get to the first house where it's safe to deposit. So now we have a question. How come over here, Abaye, you said you take it to your own house? You're allowed to wear it even to your own house. And here it says, no, more stringent. You have to give it to the first house that you see. La kashya, ha de mintera, ha de la mintera. No problem. Here we're talking about where it's a safe place. If you find a safe place right in the city wall, even though you didn't get to your house, then you give it to them. So that's what the second Braita is talking about. Whereas Abaye, he was talking about where or the people, other people in the town are not Jewish, or they're not around. It's not they're not safe, they're not trustworthy, and therefore you have to take it all the way to your house. Okay. Now, hold on. If you're talking about a case where it's not safe to leave any of these places, how come all these cases are talking about where it's already on your head? Right? These are cases we say, I'm already wearing it before Shabbat. In that case, you could leave it there on your head. If it's really not safe, there's people around that are going to steal it. Then even if you found tefillin on the floor, you're just walking around on Shabbat and you see some tefillin on the floor and it's not safe around there, you know what you're allowed to do? There's a Mishnah we learned in Eruvin that you can go ahead and you can put it on and bring it into the city. You don't want to carry it because you violate carrying, but the lower level problem of wearing tefillin is okay. And so, right, you see a whole pile of tefillin outside the city, put two on, bring it in, take them off, and then go back and bring another pair, bring them in at a time. So how come the cases here you were saying were about when I'm already wearing tefillin, which then suggests that I can't put it on in the first place, but this Mishnah said I can. If they're both talking about a place that is not safe, then it should be okay either way. And our final answer is La Kashya. Hadi min tera mehamat kanave umehamat kalbe. Hadi min tera mehamat kalbe vela min tera mehamat kanave. There are different levels of things, of places that are unsafe. So that the Braita that said you don't put them on in the first place if they're already on, that's talking about a case where it's protected from thieves and dogs. So it's generally protected. And now I just want to bring it to the house, the first house, to make sure that it's safe. So in that case, if it's already on, I could just continue to a safe place, but I can't put it on in the first place. Whereas the Mishnah in Eruvin, that's talking about a case where, okay, there's no dogs around. Even if there's no dogs around, that's safe from there, but there are thieves around. And so the thieves might come and take it. In that case, if I know that there's thieves around, then I can put on the tefillin even on Shabbat and take it to a safe place. So it's more there's less safety in the second case. And Mahu de Tema, why would I think that it would be okay? That I wouldn't have to do it. Most thieves are Jews. It doesn't mean most thieves in the world. It means most thieves around in a Jewish area who are going to steal tefillin. Furthermore, even if they steal the tefillin, they're not going to treat them with contempt. So these are pious thieves, right? They would steal someone's tefillin, but they would treat them respectfully. So we don't have to worry that they're going to be disrespected. So you might have thought that I'm not allowed to go ahead and violate Shabbat and put on the tefillin to save them, because even if thieves steal them, the thieves will still treat them respectfully. So Kamash Malan, it comes to teach us that no, in fact, some thieves are also not only are they not pious ben adam lachavero, they're also not pious ben adam lamakom. And not only will they steal the tefillin, they may also come to disrespect them. And that's why, for the sake of the respect of tefillin, we can wear the tefillin on Shabbat in order that we don't have to carry them, but we still can save them. And this is a great example of balancing various different values all together. Respect for tefillin, not wearing tefillin on Shabbat, because Shabbat is its own sign, doesn't need another sign. On the other hand, not carrying and violating Shabbat that way. And so you see the rabbis are very sensitive to the fact that things aren't always clear and black and white, but also often you have to balance values. And so they're very careful, especially in balancing the values of not working too much on Yom Tov, but also making sure to have a very joyous Yom Tov with fresh food and drink. Hadran alach, Beisah, chazakim uberuchim. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen.